Good day, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Military and Foreign Affairs Network. I am your host, the voice of reason. Well, it's good to be back and doing new content for our subscribers and anyone who happens to stumble upon the channel looking for news and information about ongoing military conflicts. Today we have entered day 105, and when I had departed, we were around day 101, so we have seen day 102, 103, 104, and now 105 kind of come and pass, and again we're now on day 105. So not a lot has changed in the ongoing conflict. We have seen some tit-for-tat operations by both Russian and Ukrainian forces in the area of Severodonetsk. We have seen Ukrainian forces counterattack with the use of fairly significant amounts of heavy artillery within the area of Severodonetsk, and then we have seen Ukrainian forces, territorial forces, special forces, and National Guard elements retake certain areas of Severodonetsk, only to be later pushed back out of these areas by very, very heavy Russian counterattack. So we believe at this point there are roughly 25 battalion tactical groups of the Russian military operating to the northwest of Severodonetsk, and obviously down south and southeast of Severodonetsk as well. And this high-pressure campaign by Russian forces continue as we speak, and as I've talked about in previous episodes before I departed, it is a pressure campaign designed to wear and sap and attrit Ukrainian forces in the ongoing campaign, where eventually you will see a general collapse of the Ukrainian forces, and that is the Russian war goal and war strategy at this moment. And the Ukrainians continue to offer very tenacious resistance in these ongoing battles that are taking place throughout the region. We are also seeing another area of operation. This is south of Izum, and we continue to see another roughly 20 to 25 Russian battalion tactical groups kind of in this very large salient that is forming, this bulge that is forming south of Izum. The Russians continue to try and press and consolidate all territorial holdings on what would be the western bank of the Donets River that is here, and we continue to see a multitude of Ukrainian brigades continuing to resist Russian operations in this area, to include, but not limited to, 3rd Armored Brigade, 81st Air Mobile, 95th Air Mobile Air Assault, 57th Motorized Rifle, 503 Marine Battalion, 4th Tank Brigade, 79th Air Mobile Air Assault, 128th Brigade, 58th Motorized Rifle, and a host of territorial and defense brigades located near Lysychansk and Severodonetsk, to include 17 Tank Brigade as well. So a very, very large component of the Ukrainian military has been dedicated to this eastern Donbass area for defensive operations, and the Ukrainians continue to try and hold the line on the opposite bank of the Donets River, while they continue to hold patches of territory on the kind of that western bank of the Donets River, and the Russians continue to mount limited maneuver operations, especially in areas such as Izum, and then obviously near Popasna as well. And you can kind of see this operation continuing. It is relentless in terms of the tempo of operations by Russian forces and the use of a lot of its heavy artillery. We are also starting to see the deployment of more and more Western equipment, namely the M777 155 millimeter howitzer being deployed. And again, as I talked about before, is this a new capability that gives something the Ukrainians that they currently do not possess? Not really. I would say the quality of the M777 surpasses that of a lot of the pre-Soviet and even post-Soviet equipment that the Russians are using or the Ukrainians are using. Based on my experience, the capabilities are relatively the same, but the timing and the deployment of that capability is of much higher quality. The M777 has been digitized and has the ability to put steel on target very, very rapidly. It has a fairly high level of ease of use, and more importantly, the manufacturing technology that is put into these systems, be it the HIMARS, be it the M777 and specifically the munitions that are being used in these systems traditionally are more superior to that of the Russian manufacturing. Now, obviously, the Russians continue to deploy a lot of systems en masse. And quantity, as most of you are known or know of this phrase, quantity has a quality all of its own. And not only that, the big issue for the Ukrainian military, they may get these systems, the HIMARS, the M777, but the concept of having to continually supply these systems with Western-made, manufactured, high-precision ordnance is something completely different. Right now, the Ukrainians just don't have the manufacturing ability to manufacture the ammunition for these systems. So they're having to rely on the Western North Atlantic Treaty Organization, United States, United Kingdom, Romania, Poland, to deliver these systems and then to safely transverse Ukraine and find these systems in the east of the Dnieper River, which is becoming more and more challenging for Ukrainian forces. So is this going to be a game changer, as people often say, in terms of the deployment of some of these systems? And I would say at this point, no, it's not. They're not being delivered in the numbers that would change the dynamic on the ground that we are seeing in this ongoing conflict. The Ukrainians are going to have to receive many more systems. They're going to have to deploy these systems not in the 10s and 20s, but in quite literally in the hundreds. In order for the Ukrainians to prosecute a successful counter operation, obviously they're going to have to train batteries and battalions in the use of these systems, equip these systems, and then also provide these units and systems with an abundance of munitions while being continually harried and attacked by long-range Russian fires. That includes tactical air assets, that includes long-range multiple launch rocket systems, that includes the use of cruise missiles and a host of other systems that make it increasingly more difficult for the Ukrainians to supply these forces, especially here in the eastern Donbass. Now, to try to alleviate a lot of this pressure that we're seeing in the eastern Donbass, we're seeing operations by the Ukrainians in other areas, and I'll try to jump over to that real quick, and let's see if it changed here, and yeah, we are good. And here in Kherson, we have continued to see Ukrainian forces continue to prosecute limited offensive operations in the direction of Kherson. And in fact, we have started to see some Russian forces that were more recently deployed in the kind of the center section towards Zaporizhia have been redeployed towards Kherson to counter some of these Ukrainian limited offensive operations. We also believe that the Ukrainians are starting to employ a lot of these newer systems, such as the 155 millimeter howitzer, and quite possibly the HIMARS, among some other more clandestine systems that have not been reported as of yet, that are being delivered to Ukrainian forces. An example of that would be the Brimstone and quite possibly some air defense systems. that have been delivered to the Ukrainian military as well. But again, these systems are not being deployed in the numbers that would really change the dynamic on the ground. The Ukrainians continue. The vast amount of Ukrainian equipment that is being used is a former Soviet manufacturer or locally upgraded Ukrainian systems that are based a lot on Russian or former Soviet designs. And we don't really know what that number is in terms of Western adoption of equipment by the Ukrainian military. We don't know what that is, but probably very, very limited in a few battalions that are being deployed. And it's also obviously the propaganda effect is also being used as well. That may make it seem like the Ukrainians are using more Western equipment, and in all probability they actually are. But now that's not to say that we will not continue to see the inflows of a lot of this Western equipment, including HIMARS, 155s, M777s being deployed. But more importantly is, will the Ukrainians receive enough munitions to supply these systems to keep them effectively in the fight? And at some point, do they start to run out of ammunition? Because obviously the Russians are targeting these systems, and more importantly, the munitions that are being brought in for these heavier systems by Russian forces, whether it's cruise missile strikes or tactical air assets being brought in to hit these systems. And it's more safer right now for the Ukrainian military to deliver these systems closer to areas of operation near Odessa, and then obviously those systems are then moved to locales near such as Mykolaiv to be then deployed against Russian forces. Much more difficult to move some of these munitions and convoys across the Dnieper River in the eastern Donbass, as opposed to being deployed in areas near Kherson and west of Kherson, and kind of in this area of operation near Mykolaiv. So we're probably seeing more Western equipment being deployed in this locale versus in the eastern Donbass, because of risk of those systems being interdicted by Russian forces as they make their way in that vast journey from the Polish or Romanian border, or the borders near the Czech and Slovak Republic, and then entering Ukraine, and then moving by rail networks, which are being degraded by Russian forces, or are being put on trucks and what have you, and then being moved far east. And again, they risk being interdicted by a variety of Russian assets before they get to their combat duty stations along the areas of operations in eastern Donbass, or such as this area, which is again more easier for these systems to be deployed with less risk than being targeted in the eastern Donbass. But we are seeing Russian forces start to commit more to this area in terms of defensive operations. We have also seen some intel chatter that indicates that at least in the West, Western intelligence believes that at some point the Russians, if and when they are able to establish control of certain objectives in the eastern Donbass, we could start to see offensive operations in the direction towards the Moldovan border. And that is one key objective that at least Western analysts believe that could be still on Russian objectives in terms of eventually moving to and capturing. At this point, I think that's probably a long way off. We would have to see, in terms of the Russian war effort, we would have to see the general collapse of the Ukrainian military in the eastern Donbass. and rapid Russian movements in the taking of large areas such as Sloviansk, Kramatorsk, Bakhmut, the eventual encirclement of Lysychansk and several Donetsk, before we would see a large-scale Russian move into west of Kherson in the direction of Mykolaiv and then obviously Odessa. That is probably way off in the distance in terms of Russian preparation. And again, right now, all eyes, at least in terms of the Russian strategy, continues to be seizing control of large amounts of territory and the eventual encirclement of Ukrainian forces that are continuing to fight in the areas of Lysychansk, Severodonetsk, and areas near Sloviansk, Kramatorsk, and Bakhmut. We're still probably a ways off for seeing that sort of success by the Russian military, but that pressure campaign continues. And once that pressure and that degrading of Ukrainian forces reaches a point, you could quite possibly see the rapid destruction of Ukrainian forces, in which they start to rapidly fall back, maybe west of the Dnieper River at some point. And but again, we still see the Ukrainian forces acting in a cohesive manner, continuing to fight in brigades and battalion-sized formations, although they are under immense pressure and taking quite a bit of casualties in the ongoing conflict. Now, with that being said, the Ukrainian state is proving to be very, very proficient at propagandizing this war and really kind of discounting its losses while really kind of focusing on reported Russian losses. And we feel at this point the losses between the two states, Russia, Ukraine, are probably on par. We would say at this point Ukrainian losses are probably now starting to become higher than Russian losses because of the nature of the Russian tactics that are being employed. Again, we are not seeing the same type of large-scale maneuvering by Russian forces. The Russians continue to focus a lot on degrading and destroying Ukrainian forces with heavy artillery, long-range rocket fires, and tactical air assets and cruise missiles as well. And that is continuing to take a toll on Ukrainian forces while it's not being messaged by Ukrainian forces, and it's probably not being messaged as much by the Russians as well. It really seems at this point the Russians don't really care, but just want to continue to prosecute the war in the manner that they are prosecuting it, and with the eventual goal of seeing kind of that general collapse along that eastern area of operations. And right now, it's really gonna come down to if the West is able to supply enough weapon systems to the Ukrainians that it eventually changes the course of the war, and are they able to start to train, deploy additional forces with some of these Western systems where they are able to counterattack effectively with multi-brigade formations. And ultimately, we don't know if that's going to happen or if the Russians are going to be successful in degrading and destroying these systems as they continue to enter Ukraine, where the Ukrainians won't be able to mount any sort of a counteroffensive, continue to see the degrading of their defensive capabilities along the entire front, where we then start to see rapid movement by Russian forces. And that's kind of what we're watching right now. And the Russians continue to control the clock. I know that's going to give pushback by some of the Ukrainian subscribers and people who watch it, in terms of those who support the Ukrainian cause. But facts are facts, and what is kind of happening on the ground right now We will continue to see the Ukrainians counterattack in localized areas, cause Russian casualties. The Russians may drop back, and then, as we're seeing right now in Severodonetsk, ultimately, the Russians will probably be successful east of the Donetsk River. Now, the big issue right now for the Russians is, are they degrading and destroying the Ukrainian forces at a pace in which we could see eventually that collapse of the Ukrainian forces, especially in this area northeast of Kramatorsk and Sloviansk, where we start to see kind of that quickening of the conflict, where you start to see kind of that rapid advance by Russian forces, which could in fact happen. Has it happened yet? No, it hasn't. But it's not to say it's not going to happen, given the pressure campaign by the Russian military that continues to pressure Ukrainian forces. But again, not a lot has changed on the map over the course since I had conducted my last video. But that's not to say that very, very high intensity operations are not being conducted by both sides. We are continuing to see very, very high intense warfare taking place in a multitude of locales, both in the eastern Donbass and more in other areas such as Zaporizhia, and then obviously Kherson as well on the previous map. But we're going to continue to monitor, report, and as the situation changes and develops, obviously we will conduct more videos. Again, it's good to be back. I appreciate everyone joining us again. Have a great day.